Welcome, life artists, to another episode of the Art of Life podcast. I am your host, Matt Ian, and today we're going to be talking about a deep subject about dealing with your mortality. Getting over your fear of death. That's something all life has in common, is that it will come to an end. And I'm very excited to get into it, so let's do it. Beautiful. I apologize to my fellow artists of life that I am a week late. I actually did record an episode, and I listened back, and it didn't feel like it captured enough of what I wanted, and I wanted to ponder on it a little bit more. And I'm glad I did that. I've been doing weekly episodes, and I might continue to do that. I might do every 2 weeks. I want this to really come from the heart. And when I'm doing it weekly, sometimes it feels a little bit rushed, and I want to give you guys a good product, and I'm not on any timeline other than my own. So sometimes you'll see me. Right now, what I'm committing to is every 2 weeks, but I might have sporadic episodes. I might have a week where I do 3. Who knows? Just so you guys know, if you want to be updated when I add an episode, just make sure you subscribe, whether it's on YouTube or Spotify. And with that, let's get into it. How to deal with your mortality, how to deal with your fear of death. I've talked about this a lot because it's such a significant thing in my life that determined why I am the way that I am, who I am, and why I live the way that I do. But as you all know, if you've been listening to the podcast, is I was once told I had 6 months to live. I was 16 years old, and from that moment on, it was like a totally different life. Right? I understood how fragile life is, and I understood that, tomorrow is not guaranteed. Like, we all kind of get that, because we all know that we're going to die, and we all know, but it's not real. I don't know if that makes sense. It's not real. Like, a lot of times, part of the human condition is we take things for granted because we're used to them, and we are creatures of habit. And so from this habit, we continue to expect things to be the same. And the only constant, that's like a famous Buddhist quote, the only thing that is constant and forever is change. And so let's dive right into it. A part of being a human being and being so wise and so intelligent is our awareness that we will die. And coming to terms with that will be one of the most powerful things you can do for your life. And how I did that, I did it because I faced it, but I spent so many years, wondering what's my prognosis. Like, there's so many things that could go wrong. I've had so many near-death experiences. And I never thought like I was initially super afraid of death, but there's a fear of death for all living beings. You try to kill a spider in your bathroom, it will run away. It's scared for its life. Same with, you can get as small as possible as single cell organisms, and you can go as big as humans or elephants. Like, everything wants to live. And we want to live as a byproduct of this fear of death, right? And that fear is realistically a survival mechanism. If we didn't have fear, we wouldn't live very long. I live life pretty rude, as some of my friends like to say. I take a lot of calculated risks. But if I wasn't scared of death, at like some way, if I didn't understand that I could be harmed or there wasn't pain, there's no way I would still be alive. There's always that thing on the edge, right? If you go bungee jumping, even if you know the cable's there, it's still scary to make that jump because that is like an inherent, deep part of you rooted that you want to protect yourself. Now, how we come to terms with it is, well, like we said, what is fear? Fear is a defense mechanism, but what is it specifically about death that you're afraid of? Because there's a lot of different components, right? Is it just like the ideal of not existing, right? Like leaving your loved ones behind and not knowing what's going to happen? Is it something someone told you that made you scared? Is it like a religious thing where like, I'm scared to go to hell, I haven't done enough righteousness or paid my karma? Or is it the process of dying? Because that's still scary for me. Like watching your body degrade, the suffering that comes with illness, that's still scary to me. I always talk about I want to leave this world the same way I came in, kicking and screaming, covered in blood. I say that as a joke, but there's some reality to it. I've spent a lot of time ill in the hospital, and there's some value to dying that way because you're watching your death come, and you have time to come to terms with it. And anything that's not left unsaid or undone, you have the opportunity to do and say. But what I think when I talk to most people about this, and this is a topic that's come up a lot in my life because of the communities I've frequented based on transplant, based on the disease that I've had, based on, just my community of people from the healthcare sector that are dealing with similar things to me. It's a lot of people are just, I'm not ready to die because with this life, there's things I have left to do, right? It's rooted in a life not fully lived. And that's a really important lesson. I think the sooner you come to terms with, the more fulfilling your life will be. Because I didn't think I was going to get ill. Someone today died not thinking they were going to die today. And they put things off. And it's cheesy and you hear it all the time. But you need to hear it all the time for you to digest it. Because I don't always live like I might die tomorrow. And I've been through it. I've been on that cusp of death. I remember being so ill, and I've said this before, where like I knew I could just give up and it was over. So I've been there, and still human nature, habit, distractions will take away that significance. And so it's a constant battle of being mindful of that. Right? And so when we talk about what would you do if it was your last day on this planet? Right? What would you do if you had the opportunity to pick? But what if you didn't have to pick, but you could go back and watch yourself relive that last day? And you had to do those exact things, but you could tell yourself to be present. Right? When you're making your morning coffee, don't rush it, Watch the steam come off the cup. Listen to what you're adding to your coffee and see the milk bubble up and change the color, and hear the spoon swivel and watch the steam come off the top, and how the temperature of that warm coffee fills your mouth and how it makes your body feel. And just being present. Like when someone's on death row, they're entitled to a last meal. Have you ever thought about what that must be like for that person to get that last meal? Like, to get that last meal and be so present every bite, knowing that this is the last thing I get to do on this planet before my life gets taken from me based on the consequences of my actions. Or if you're innocent, like, you're still going to face that. And so how would that last meal taste? Something else I thought so much about was, what would my funeral look like? I've been to a lot of funerals in my life. I've been to a funeral of a friend of mine who was 16 when he passed away. And I've also been to, and it's someone I love dearly. He was a friend of mine. He wasn't super close. He's someone I cared about a lot. And then I've also been to my grandfather and grandmother's funerals, who were people that I grew up with and I loved dearly and helped raise me. And to some extent, those funerals were less sad than one of my good friends, who I wasn't as close to. And then you ponder why. And it comes back to that thing that we talked about, 2 minutes ago, was like, was this a life fully filled? When you have a funeral, it's supposed to be a celebration of the life lived. And I really got that at my grandfather's funeral, because the stories from his friends and the pictures from his, youth and his adolescence, and everyone had such powerful things to say. And I got to, speak for his eulogy and talk about the impact he had on my life. And man, the years that man had this planet, he experienced so much, and he impacted so much. And at that point, he died, as a byproduct of a long battle with health issues, up and down. But at that point, death almost comes as a relief, right? Like, I've thought that, like, when you're that age and your body's not listening to you, and you're in pain and you're discomfortable and discomfortable. I swear I can talk normally, and then I turn on a camera and mic and I start mixing up my words. But that's something you can celebrate, and that comes back to that thing of, like, we have to fulfill what we deem important for us. So an exercise that I did personally was like, what's my funeral going to look like? And this really helped me come to terms with, I could die tomorrow. I don't want to die. But if I died tomorrow, at 30 years old, I can sit here and be very happy with the things I've accomplished, the impact I've had, because I can think about my funeral. And if I think about my funeral, the lives I've impacted, and the people who I've loved, and just the experience that I've had, the countries that I've seen, the ice baths and the surfing and the training and the friendships and the laughter and the great meals, and the times I was scared and the times I was hurt. And like, I can look back at every single piece of that so fondly. And that's like something I've talked about a lot, or I've heard a lot, that really I pondered was, if an alien, you were just a soul, and an alien species was like, hey, you get to, pick these different types of beings to be, and that's a human. Humans don't have a ton of power, but they feel everything so deeply. This is how long their life is. No other creature gets to feel that much. Would you choose that? Well, you have to feel a lot of suffering, but you get to feel immense joy as well. And that to me was just a beautiful idea of like, oh, I choose everything. I choose that, my life is only worth a damn, as well as all of us, is because it comes to an end. That I have a certain amount of time to do. If I had infinite time to do anything I want, I wouldn't feel any kind of rush. I wouldn't feel any kind of importance to get out of bed. It's that ticking time clock that, for myself, that like gives a little bit of anxiety, like, oh, I have stuff I have left to do. And that's exciting, right? And the reality is, as we march towards death, what makes it come so fast? Because everybody talks about, like, it comes in a blink of an eye. I was having this conversation today, we're like, where the heck did the year go? The days go by slow, but the years go by fast, because the days feel slow, but then next thing you know, and it has to do with time doesn't exist, right? What is time? Time is a measure of change. And this was like something I came to terms with, and why I lived life so chaotically and never put roots and was just traveling and trying different things, was because I realized at a young age that time wasn't real. It was a measure of change. It was a measure of, days turn to night, seasons change, we age, and that's how we determine time. And so if I could stimulate as much change as possible in my short life, because I didn't think I'd live that long, I could live more years than someone who had 100 years. And like everything, there's a cost to that. There's a cost to living chaotically. There's a cost to like forcing change into your life. But I wouldn't change it. I went and did that. And the freedom that comes with knowing, like, I wouldn't want to live forever. I don't think most of us, if we really think about it, would want to live forever. It's like a trope in movies. It's a trope in, the vampire that lived forever. He's suffering. You watch everyone you love die, and you don't relate to people anymore. It's really lonely, it sounds like. And so to deal with that fear and accept that, like, this is coming to an end, what's left, right? When you think about your funeral, if you could, choose how you would go, what would you do? Who would be around you? Think about it. What would be your last meal? What would be the music you want to play at your funeral? Like, if you got to pick every aspect of it, and you don't necessarily, but it allows you to kind of ponder on, like, the life that you want to live to set yourself up for that. Like, I know when I go, I want to go fast. I don't want to suffer. And I know that I want people to remember me for the impact I had in their lives and the good feelings I gave them and the lessons I taught them and the value I brought to my life, to their lives. Like, that's what's really important to me. And when you start to understand that, you can see why everything I do in my life is for that. And before I write all these podcasts, as I talk about all the time, I have these notes, but I remember I was a passenger in a car in Montreal, and I saw graffiti, and it said, if you're waiting for something or someone to free you, you are a slave. And I've never forgotten that, and that's very much tied to this episode with the idea of death. Because we're constantly going through the cycle, like, tomorrow I'll deal with it. Oh, I'll start this later, You're waiting for something or someone to come and, tell you have 6 months to live, to be like, fuck, what am I going to do? And that's like a story we see all the time now with social media, because it's inspiring and it makes us feel good that someone's like, I got to end life diagnosis. Here's what I'm going to do with the squeezing out of my life. I'm going to take all these trips. I'm going to do this. I'm going to confess my love. But there's a value to when you start to understand that can happen and to not be attached to the idea that I need to survive very long. You can start to do those things, and accepting death is kind of the ultimate freedom, right? The anxiety is not going to make you survive any longer. If anything's going to kill you sooner. And that's like something, I learned too, is like when I was going through all the medical stuff I was going through, what did anxiety do? I'm waiting for a result. Like, is it cancer? Is it this disease? Are they going to need more surgery? And I'd sit there anxious, and I'm like, all I'm doing is suffering for something that doesn't exist anymore. Because that might be a really good result, and I just lost 3 days. Or it could be an awful result, and they can be like, hey, you're dying in 10 days. And I still wasted those 3 days, just being anxious. So instead, letting go, right? Like I've said before in the episodes, let go or risk being dragged. And we all know when we talk about People don't regret as much what they did do, they regret what they didn't do. They regret what they didn't say. And so to take that risk by understanding that this is all coming to an end. No, none of us are making it out of this alive. No one who listens to this podcast is going to survive forever. And so take some risks. Come to terms with the fact, and I know it's hard, and understanding where your fear comes from, and get curious and recognize that if I go, I go, and I'm okay. And if I'm not okay with going yet, figure out why and start doing the things you have to get to that point. Because I can't tell you how freeing it is. A lot of times in hospice care, like hospice is end of life care, like you're going to die. And so they have doctors with you, but they have people who are like death doulas, or people who help you come to terms with the fact that you're going to die and the things that you want to do. And sometimes psychedelics play a role in this. But something I heard from someone who worked in hospice, who's important to me, which was really interesting, she said, usually what I saw the most was people who were urgently wanting to see someone. Like, I want to see my son, I want to see my son. That's just an example. And when they see that person, they let go and pass. And there's other people who, their family was just around them all the time. And the second they stepped away to go get coffee, they passed because they didn't want to pass in front of their family like that. Which can give you some value that, like, if that's the way you go, you have some control. You have some control when you go. There's a point where a lot of people, I think, can choose to let go. And I think a lot of times our fear comes from the unknown and the lack of control. Right? Like, a lot of us grow up being scared of the dark. But it's not the dark we're scared of. It's what's in the dark. Right? It's the unknown of the dark. And as we get older, we get less afraid of the dark because we start to realize through experience, like, most of the time there's nothing bad in the dark. Actually, I've had some amazing times in the dark. Maybe my first kiss. Maybe, who knows? These sleepover with my friends. You start to have, I went to see this movie I loved, and that was in the dark. And so the same is true with death, that you can understand that, like, the unknown stops being scary when you recognize that it'll be what it'll be and there's no control about it. There's nothing we can do to stop it. We can slow it down, we can change our habits, but we will come to that, and that we deal with the unknown every day. If that's what you're scared of, every day you wake up, there's an unknown. Every day aliens could land, an asteroid could happen. You don't know what's going to happen on the road or at work, and so you just think of this as the grand unknown, because no one's gone to the other side and come back and be like, hey, this is what's going to happen, guys. So we don't know. It's a deep, deep unknown. But also, you face the unknown every day with so much courage. I think that's all the points I wanted to get to. As always, if you found this useful, or you have a friend that you think would have value from this, please share it with them. Please follow us on social media. Okay, AOL Podcast, The Art of Life Podcast on YouTube. We're on TikTok and Instagram. It's all going to be in the show notes. And as always, if you enjoyed it, rate with 5 stars. And ending with a quote. Again, I'm on my stoicism lately, so we're ending with an Epicurus quote. And it's, death is nothing to us. When we exist, death is not. And when death exists, we are not. All sensations and consciousness ends with death. And therefore in death there is neither pleasure nor pain. The fear of death arises from the belief that in death there is awareness. And I just thought that was so beautiful. I read it for the first time on one of my students' Instagram stories. He reposted something. But why would I be afraid of something that can't exist unless I don't exist? My death doesn't exist unless I no longer exist. I don't remember what it was like before I was born. I don't think I'm going to remember what it was like after I'm gone. Right? I don't know, what are your beliefs or what comes next? And that's something I haven't really touched on, so this is our little extra after the quote, but what I believe truly is that we know energy and matter cannot be created or destroyed. It can just be transformed. And I think we are both energy and matter. And so I think just the part of me that is energy, my spirit, will go on, not into a reincarnation cycle to say, but just in all the life of the planet. And that my matter, my body, this vessel, will go into nourishing other atoms on this planet, more carbon. Right? We're just always in a cycle of life and death. That's what seasons are. That's what days and nights are. Everything around us is constantly dying and coming to life and rebirth, and it's this orchestra, and it's beautiful, right? Think about the fall. If you're someone who lives in the northern hemisphere and can see fall, it's the death of the leaves and the rebirth in the spring, and it's beautiful, and it's such a powerful experience to see. And on that note, I appreciate you guys. I will see you in 1 to 2 weeks. And as always, stay strong, stay confident. Let's conquer those fears and make the most out of life. Cheers.